Hello guys, welcome back to another book review with your boy, me. So I'm gonna go over the books that I read in the month of November. I almost forgot what month I read these in. Actually, let me start off by saying in the last video I did not put any spoilers. In this video, I'm gonna talk about the plot summary, and like there will probably be spoilers in these videos from now on. I'm just gonna do it like that. I'm gonna tell you book title, author, plot summary, what I like and didn't like, and my final rating. So that's how we're gonna do these videos from now on. If you don't like it, you smell. So let's get into it. So the first book I read was The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry by C.M. Wagner. Now let's just go ahead and just take a look at the cover, dude. The cover is just phenomenal. Like, I was in Barnes & Noble, saw this just sitting there, and I was like, wow, this cover is really fun. And I know you're supposed to not judge a book by its cover, but you know what? Who doesn't do that, bro? If I see a cover of a book that does not look fun or anything, I just probably won't even pick up the book, to be fair. So, the plot summary. What is this book about? The main character, Delaria Wells, is kind of like this street urchin. The book starts off with her trying to find her drug addict mother. She ends up being in like this abandoned drug house. And they have like a little chit chat, and like her mother's kind of like a piece of shit, but you know, drug addicts do be doing what they do. And Delaria is kind of down on her luck, needs some money, and she sees this flyer for a job. It says something along the lines of like, magically inclined women, please apply. It's kind of vague on what the job really is, but she applies for it after being arrested. The job ends up turning out to be like a bodyguard job. She's supposed to, along with a bunch of other characters, protect this very rich woman, survive until she gets married, because it's kind of vague, but there are people that don't want her to get married, that are trying to stop her and kill her. And so Delaria Wells is tasked with the job of protecting this person until the marriage. Delaria Wells, her power, everybody has like their own kind of like inherent magic ability. Everybody's kind of different. Delaria, the main character, she's a fire witch. She controls fire, she can melt things. Delaria is not alone. She has a group of people that have also applied to this job. One is an elderly woman named Miss Totham, who calls herself a body scientist but is really just a necromancer. Her daughter, who I forget her name, who is a shapeshifter. She can turn into a boar. And the love interest in this book, Wynn, who is a half troll, I believe, and I don't think she has magic ability herself, but she's like a really good sharpshooter. As the story progresses, they are protecting this rich woman. Her name is Miss Wexen. It turns out that her sister is the one trying to kill her, because her sister is a drug addict and owes a lot of people money. And so she was trying to kill her sister so she would inherit the money when she died, I guess, because she was the older sister. That's just kind of how it goes. The older one gets the inheritance, whatever. She was trying to bop her sister so she could get the inheritance to pay off all these drug dealers and fund her drug addict life. And she ends up killing the daughter of Miss Totham, the shape-shifting girl, and she runs and goes off on the lam, and the story is them trying to find this sister of Miss Wexen to bring her to justice. And the book sounds great on paper, like it ticks all the boxes for me. Oh, it's got magic, it's got an adventure, but I don't know, there's just something about this book that really didn't hook me in. I found myself not really caring too much about the characters. I think it was mainly the writing. I think it's how it was written, because there would be plot points and scenes in the book that were interesting, but then the pacing would like come to a halt, and it would just talk about how two of the characters would go off and eat dinner and then walk back to their hotel room. Like, I feel like that's just not needed. You can just like go from one scene, end the chapter, and then start where the plot picks back up. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I felt like the pacing was really bad. And also, the climax of the book, I swear to God, didn't happen until probably the last 2 chapters or something, when they finally find the sister. Turns out she's being held captive by a drug gang. She is having her life force sucked out of her to make a drug called drip. I don't know, it's just very underwhelming. That it just kind of made me mad that it took so long to get to the juicy parts of the book. And also, this is not the first book that this author, C.M. Wagner, has written. She has written another book previously to this, I forget the name of it, but it's in the same universe as this book, and they mention things and talk about things that's kind of hard to understand, that they don't explain. Like, they talk about magic parameters, which they never really explain too much. They just talk about, oh, my parameters for the spell were off, so I felt dizzy. They never really go in depth with it. It's just kind of like, I feel like I'm supposed to just, they assume I already know about that, so maybe they talk about it in the first book. I did a little research, and I knew that there was a book in the same universe as this book, but people said that, oh yeah, it's got its own story, yeah, there's like characters in both books, but like, it's not a big deal. Yeah, I feel like they explain things not very well. But anyway, I'm gonna give Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry a 2 out of 5. The story was okay, took a little too long to get juicy, and yeah, they just talked about things that they didn't really explain too much. The next book was the book club book of the month, called A Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. Now this book, oh, chef's kiss. This is kind of like a mystery thriller book, and this was, oh my Lanta, this is good. I really like this book. So the plot is, there's 2 characters. Each chapter follows the point of view of one of 2 characters. There's Sarah, the wife, who is the best defense attorney in Washington, D.C., and the second character is Adam, the husband, who is a writer and also being charged with the murder of his mistress, who he's been cheating on for like the past year with his wife. The book starts off, Adam goes to the lake house to try and write a new book. Previously, his first book was a huge success, but he hasn't really had success since then. But every time he goes to the lake house to write, he lies to his wife, and he just meets his mistress, Kelly Summers. And, you know, they have like a sex-filled weekend or whatever, and one day, Adam is leaving the lake house and leaving Kelly there, and he goes home to his wife at like 2 in the morning or something. His wife is already asleep, and he wakes up to realize that the cops are at his door, and Kelly Summers was found dead in the lake cabin, found by the maid that was cleaning up in the morning. Like, there's a whole lot of plot that goes on in this book. I won't get into too in-depth with it because it would just be me talking about it for like 20 minutes, but the basic plot of the book is the wife, Sarah, takes it upon herself to defend her husband against this murder charge. And it's really interesting to see how she goes through and like her thoughts as she's doing this. Yes, he's a piece of shit. He cheated on her, but like she's gonna do her best to defend him. And then Adam, who is like, I feel like Adam throughout the book just fucks things up for himself like every chapter. Like he gets put on house arrest, but he starts talking to a reporter. He escapes from prison, he escapes from the police station, he's on the lam for like 2 days, and it basically, you find out at the end that Sarah, the wife who's defending him, was the one that killed Kelly Summers. She knew that he was cheating on her all along. She ended up drugging both of them, and while they were drugged, sneaks into the cabin, kills Kelly Summers while Adam is asleep, and then just dips, and Adam like never even knew. And the book ends like 11 years later, I think. Adam is set to be executed for the murder, and Sarah, who hasn't seen him in 11 years, goes to visit him, kind of hints at the thought of, oh, it was me all along. Did he deserve to die for cheating on his wife? I don't know, probably not, no. Is he a good person? No. Is she a good person? No. But yeah, it's kind of savage how she's just like sitting there smiling as he's being executed while like all of his loved ones are there crying, and like Kelly Summers' family thinks that justice has been served, and she like walks out, and it turns out she has a kid with some guy that had helped her throughout the story. His name is Bob, and she names her daughter Summer after Kelly Summers, which is kind of like, what the hell? So what I liked about this book was I loved the pacing of the book. The chapters aren't very long, and it makes it feel like you're progressing through the story very quickly, and things happen very quickly as well. And I'm a very slow reader, and this is like one of the few books that I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to see what happens in the next chapter, I gotta keep reading. I feel like everything that's written in this book, there's a reason for it, and there's purpose to it. I'm gonna rate The Perfect Marriage 4 out of 5. Highly recommend this book. This book is fantastic. Next is A Study in Scarlet by Arthur, what the hell is his name? Arthur Conan Doyle, or this is the first iteration of Sherlock Holmes. This book is a little interesting. I don't really know how I feel about it, but the book starts off with, it's the point of view of Watson. The book starts off with Watson being in the army as a medic. He gets discharged for being injured, needs a place to stay. He decides to live in London, and he ends up meeting Sherlock Holmes, who his friend introduces as like this weirdo who works at the hospital and like is always doing like weird experiments that make no sense. And Watson finds Sherlock so fascinating that he can't not live with this guy, right? So they end up getting a house together. Sherlock Holmes will just like go into the living room and he'll talk to somebody for like 30 minutes and then they'll leave. And he's just like, what are you doing? Like, he's like, Sherlock Holmes is like, oh, this is how I make money. People come to me for problems and solutions to, you know, mysteries and crime scenes, and I help solve them. And he's like, dude, you do that from the living room? You don't even have to like go to the crime scene or anything? And he's like, nah, dude, I'm smart. Sherlock Holmes takes him to a crime scene to kind of just like explain further how he does things, and it's basically just like, the way the book goes is Sherlock Holmes talks to people, he looks at things, he tells them what happened, and then everyone's like, oh, what the hell, how'd you come to this conclusion? And then he explains how he came to the conclusion. It's kind of like the formula for this book. And in the middle, it switches from Sherlock Holmes and Watson and a couple of detectives catching the guy who, you know, committed this crime, and it switches and it goes to this guy's backstory about how he came to be a murderer in the first place. And that's like the coolest part of the book, because it switches to like the American desert in Utah, and it's like you find yourself in a Mormon colony. A man and a little girl who were in like some kind of caravan in the desert, they get separated and they're about to die, but a giant Mormon caravan comes through and like picks them up, and they're like, hey, we'll take you with us, but you gotta be Mormon now. And I think his name is John, and he's just like, I ain't got a choice, dude. I guess I'm Mormon now if I want to live. And so he becomes like a very well-respected person in the Mormon community. He has like one of the best farms in the community, but he never takes any wives. And the leader of the Mormons comes up to him and is like, dude, listen, why aren't you taking wives? It's kind of weird. And he's just like, I don't know, no reason really, but secretly he like hates being a Mormon. He thinks they're weird. The leader of the Mormons turns to him and is like, okay, well, your daughter has to marry somebody, and he's either gonna marry my son or somebody else's son. And so the daughter writes a letter to her lover, who is off gallivanting, doing something, and he ends up coming back and saving both John and his daughter. They go into the desert, into the canyons to hide, and John and his daughter end up dying. And so it turns out the murderer back in London is the lover of the girl, who takes revenge on these two guys that he tracks all over the world, through America, over the seas to London, and like it's this giant revenge story, but like it took him his whole life to do it. He's like 60 and he has like heart problems, and he's in the police station talking to Sherlock Holmes and Watson and the detectives, explaining this, and then he like dies before his court date because like really he was only being kept alive by his need for revenge. That was the coolest part of the book. I don't really care about the Sherlock Holmes and the Watson part. That was cool, seeing how you know, the backstory of the killer. I don't really have like too strong of an opinion either way about liking or disliking this. The only thing that I didn't like about it, I guess, is there was some terms that I wasn't familiar with. Like, I didn't realize that Scotland Yard was what they just called police in London. I was thinking the whole time, I was like, dude, why is there like Scottish police in London? It doesn't make any sense. But turns out that's just, they're named that after the place that the headquarters are in. Little did I know. Sorry. But Study in Scarlet, Arthur Conan Doyle, I'll give it a 3 out of 5. It was pretty okay. I might read another Sherlock Holmes book in the future, but I'm not like jumping at the chance to. Alright, now, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This book is chef's kiss, I'll tell you what. Even better, I liked it even better than A Perfect Marriage. The plot to this book, Wade Watts, and I know it's a weird name, trust me, he makes fun of his name in the book as well. His dad named him that because his dad wanted him to have a superhero name like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. Wade Watts, the main character, is a teenager in the year 2040, something like that, and the world has gone to shit. Poverty is running rampant, you know, fossil fuels are getting low, overpopulation is apparent. He lives in the stacks, and the stacks are literally, I don't know if you can see on the cover of the book, but just trailers stacked on top of each other to kind of help with overpopulation. He's very poor. The only thing that Wade Watts does in his spare time is he logs into the Oasis, which is this giant virtual reality world that you can do anything in. You can play video games, he goes to school in the Oasis, you can hang out with your friends, you can go on adventures, climb mountains, literally like anything you could think of, you can do in Oasis. And you can use it for anything. Companies use it, people use it. Not too long ago, one of the creators of the Oasis dies and leaves this giant Easter egg hunt. And whoever finds this Easter egg will become the owner of the Oasis. And he leaves this like almanac, almost like a Bible, after he's dead. It's like a journal he's kept throughout his life. And everyone realizes that this guy was obsessed with 80s culture when he was growing up. The people who are hunting the eggs, they nickname themselves Gunters, or egg hunters, just become so obsessed with 80s pop culture and 80s references. Anything from like John Hughes movies to 80s cartoons. It's kind of funny to see how like people in 2040 are going back to the trends in the 80s, because that kind of happens in real life too. You see trends, and like trends kind of go into a cycle. Trends do actually repeat themselves in the real world as well. You know, all these teenagers in 2040 are becoming obsessed with 80s pop culture and trying to, you know, figure out the hints and the clues that this guy has left. Wade and his friends are not the only people trying to find this. It's like a worldwide thing. And there's a company called IOI, I forget what it stands for, but they call them Sixers because the employees of the company are almost like militaristic, and they all wear like the same blue shirt, and they call them Sixers because their in-game name is just like IOI and then 6 numbers afterwards. So it becomes kind of like a race to see who gets the egg first. Is it gonna be Wade or one of his friends, or is it gonna be this corrupt company, IOI? And all I'll say is the action in this book pops off very quickly. In one of the first chapters, Wade is invited to a meeting with a higher up in IOI. Nolan Sorrento is this corporate IOI guy that invites Wade into a meeting, and so he logs into the Oasis. He gets invited to a meeting in the Oasis. Basically, Sorrento gives him an ultimatum. He's like, listen man, we'll give you like a couple $1 million if you help us. We'll hire you. You can work with us to help find this egg. And obviously Wade is just like, no, you can shove it up your ass, whatever. And then Sorrento finally looks at him and he's like, okay, listen, if you don't help us, we're gonna fucking blow up your house. And like, this was in like the first like 50 pages or so, 100 pages. And I'm just sitting here like, oh my god. And so Wade logs out and kind of calls this guy's bluff, and he logs out, and then here's an explosion outside. He's not at his home, thank God, when this happens, but he logs off and hears a giant explosion, and the entire stack that he was living in just crumbles to the ground. And he goes on the lam, he moves to Chicago, and he vows to like not leave his house until he finds this egg. And he even like spray paints his windows black. He becomes obsessed with the idea of finding this egg. At the end, Wade ends up beating Sorrento in a giant fight. Sorrento is in the Oasis and he's piloting a giant Mechagodzilla, while Wade and his friends are in like classic 80s giant robots like Gundams. And the internet, I like reading about books after I've read them to see people's opinions, and it's very split one way or the other. Either you love the 80s pop culture references and the nostalgia, or you hate it. I almost feel like there's no in between. But I'm on the side of this book is phenomenal. I loved all the references. I didn't grow up in the 80s. You know, I've seen John Hughes movies, I've seen 80s cartoons, and I respect it all. This book is a 5 out of 5. I highly recommend this book. If you are a nerd at all, you will find something to like in this book. There's gotta be at least one reference that just makes you feel like, ooh, they put that in the book. That's kind of fun. There's also a second book to this, but I don't know if this book ends very well. Like, I don't think there needs to be a second book. At the end, Wade gets the egg. There's this girl, Artemis, who runs a blog that he's like been in love with secretly. And at the end, they finally meet in real life. They've never met in real life until the very end of the book in the last chapter. The last line of the book goes like, after he's gotten the egg, he's signed papers to like become the owner of the Oasis, meets Artemis for the first time and kisses her, and he says to himself, for the first time in a long time, I had no interest in logging into the Oasis, because he really just had everything he's ever wanted. But yeah, I don't know why there would be a second book. It kind of scares me. It almost feels like the second book might be just like a cash grab. Alright, so we go from a 5 out of 5 to the exact opposite. This is Shielded by Kaylin Flanders. I did not like this book at all. The plot of this book is a princess, Janasara, who has this magical ability she calls tethers, which is basically kind of like a fishing line attached to her father and brother, where she can feel their emotions. The kingdom that they live in, Halendi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but is at war, and her father, the king, tells her that she has to go off and marry this random prince because they need their help in the war. She's pissed about it, whatever. On the way there, her caravan gets attacked. There's an assassination plot. She ends up going through the forest called the Wild, which is this forest with magical abilities and like weird things happen in the forest. Like vines try to kill her. She's in like this weird oasis. It's in the middle of winter, but there's this area that she's in that like tricks her into thinking she's warm and safe. First of all, I don't like the writing style of this book. This is the author's debut book. No offense to her, but she repeats herself a lot, and there's a lot of spelling and grammatical errors as well. For an example, the term pursed lips, like 3 times every chapter. Like, please find a different phrase, you know? When she gets hurt by the shadow demon that's being summoned by this wizard, it stabs her and it leaves an icy feeling of pain, and she just says that so much, dude. Like, just say it once or find a different way to say it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need the same phrase, oh, my wound felt icy 5 times in 1 chapter. Like, I just felt the book to be very hard to get through because of that, and the more I think about it, the more I just don't care about the characters as well. Shielded, 1 out of 5. I just really don't like anything about this book, really. But yeah, that was the last book that I read for the month. The first book that I'm going to read this month in December, if you guys would like to follow along and then we can talk about it maybe next month, that would be cool, is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. And I read the first chapter last night and I fell asleep because I was very tired. But it seems like it's gonna be a good book. The premise, 6 people every 10 years that get selected to join the Alexandrian Society, which is the society that has like unlimited knowledge of magic, history, anything you could really ask for. It's almost like a contest between the 6 people, and only 5 people will survive. 1 person will die at the end. Yeah, it seems very interesting. I think there's a second book and a third one being made, so it has to be good, right? Who knows? That's it for me, guys. Thanks for hanging out. And if you like the video, like, comment, subscribe. And I'll see ya next month. Bye. See ya. Bye.